Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. I was just catching up on some light reading. Don Quixote. Oh, you want to hear about it? Cool. So I'm actually on chapters 5 and 6. I just finished them. It's actually probably some of the slower chapters of the book compared to the rest of them, but still very interesting. So in chapter 5, this guy, Don Quixote, who has taken it upon himself to become a knight, has decided that he's going to make these other guys claim the beauty of his lady love. And when they don't agree with that because, well, they've never seen her before, he gets beat up. So, ironically, a guy from his village finds him and asks him, hey, like, what happened to you? You are in shambles. And Don Quixote, instead of just saying what happens, begins to quote books. He begins to quote books and songs from chivalry or knighthood that he remembers. So the guy who comes to help him never actually figures out in true detail what has happened to Don Quixote. So they travel to the village, and instead of this gentleman taking him right in, he kind of waits for a minute because Don Quixote clearly has lost his mind. And so Don Quixote actually says that he was just beaten up by these giants. These giants have beaten him up, and if it wasn't for his horse, he would have won the battle. Unbeknownst to the guy, these were just regular men. It actually was like one guy who beat up Don Quixote. But again, in his mind, he believes that he just fought giants. So he's kind of losing it. This chapter actually is what represents how off center he really is. There are a lot of other things that have happened, but this one really puts in perspective how off Don Quixote is. So eventually they get to the village, they go to Don's house, and his niece, the priest, the barber, and his housekeeper are all at the house. And they're having this conversation amongst themselves saying like, where's Don Quixote? He's been gone for like 3 days. And all I know is he's been reading these books on knighthood and chivalry. And I'm afraid that he just left and he's trying to convince himself that he can be a knight one day. And so this neighbor comes, brings Don Quixote. They're asking what happened to him. And all Don Quixote is saying is, I've just been in this battle and I need rest and I need food. And that's it. So the people who are at his house decide, we have got to save this guy. While he's sleeping, we need to go through his entire library, clean out any books about knighthood and chivalry because he has lost his mind, thinking that he can become a knight. So the next day, the priest, the barber, the niece, and the housekeeper come together and they take it upon themselves to clean out his library. So this part of the book is actually quite humorous in a very different way. The rest of it has been us just pretty much making fun of Don Quixote and laughing at him for being ridiculous. But this part is interesting because the priest decides to clean out his library, Don Quixote's library, and realizes, hey, he actually has a pretty good library. So the priest, who almost comes off as a know-it-all, as I know what's best and what isn't, we'll get rid of, goes through Don's library. And he and the barber decide, oh, these are good books. So every book that they come across, or the majority of them, there's almost always a reason why they shouldn't burn it. So they come across one book and it's like, oh, well, this is the first of its kind, so we can't get rid of this book. And then the next one is, oh, well, this is by this author, so we can't get rid of this book, and so forth and so on. And so it's very funny and interesting because they came into it with this idea that they knew what was best and were getting rid of all of it. And then they're realizing, oh, like, maybe we don't know what's best. Maybe some of these books should stay. So there's a funny little gem in this chapter in particular because they come across a book, Galatea, by Miguel de Cervantes, who is the writer of Don Quixote as well. So it's a very humorous moment because the priest says, oh, I know this guy actually, and there's a second part to this book. So we really shouldn't get rid of the first part of Galatea until we can read the second part. So we'll hold on to it as well. And it's actually quite funny because there's a second part to Don Quixote as well. And there may have been a bit of a wait for the second part of this book also. So they go through these books, they keep a lot of them, they get rid of a lot of them. There's even this little funny moment with the priest where he says, Any books that are in translation, we should get rid of because they just don't translate properly and you don't get the full meaning behind the story. And so that's funny as we're reading a translated version of Don Quixote from Spanish to English. And another very funny part is the niece of Don Quixote says, hey, you know what? All this is actually really my fault. I should have told somebody that my uncle was losing his mind, that he was reading these books on knighthood and chivalry, and I didn't. And so now I'm to blame. And we need to get rid of every book in this library because had it been just books on poetry, Don Quixote would have believed that he should become a poet as well. So she's like, we need to get rid of everything because my uncle is not in his right mind. So it's very funny how they go through this, how they come up with these decisions. And actually, we're kind of paused here. Like, I don't know what happens next. I haven't read the next chapter yet, but it's very interesting that this is the approach that they choose to take with these particular books and that Miguel de Cervantes chooses to take in this turn in the story. That's all. I love you guys. I miss you so much. This is how much I love you. I shot this video days ago and it was like 10 minutes long. And I, because I'm imperfect and make mistakes, deleted it. And it was really good and I was really happy about it. Brandon was cheering me on while I did it. And I deleted it. And so here I am reshooting this video because you deserve a good video and you deserve a good summary of this story because I have not been there to give you one. And sometimes it's just not fun to read by yourself. Less than 30 days together we have. So let's make them count. Miss you guys like crazy. I miss you. Bye.